I used to think Megan and I had the perfect marriage. We met 10 years ago at a friend's party, and from the moment she smiled at me, I was hooked. We shared everything. The same dark humor, love for travel, even late-night debates about movies. Megan was my best friend, my partner in crime, and the love of my life, or so I thought. Things started changing about a year ago. Little things at first. Megan was always close to Claire, her best friend since college. They had an inseparable bond that I never questioned. Claire was over at our house more than some family members, always sharing laughs with Megan over a bottle of wine. I chalked it up to just being girl time. But then Megan became distant. She'd pull away when I tried to hold her. Her phone, once casually left on counters and couches, was suddenly glued to her hand or locked with a password I didn't know. Date nights turned into excuses. "Claire needs me," she'd say, rushing out the door without explanation. At first, I didn't think much of it. Megan and Claire were practically sisters. Who was I to be the jealous husband? But when Megan started working late on nights I knew she had no work, and Claire's car was often parked suspiciously nearby, I started to feel the gnawing doubt creep in. I convinced myself it was just paranoia. Megan would never cheat on me. Claire would never betray me like that. But the unease refused to leave. Something wasn't right. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a rainy Friday evening, and Megan had told me she was meeting Claire for dinner. I didn't think twice about it, until I drove past the restaurant Megan said they'd be at and saw no sign of her car. Maybe they changed plans, I thought. But something didn't sit right. I couldn't ignore the knot tightening in my chest, so I decided to call her. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Megan always picked up or texted back within minutes. I sent a quick text instead. "Hey, just checking in. How's dinner?" No reply. I sat in my car outside the restaurant, watching the rain streak down the windshield, trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy. After 10 minutes, I started driving aimlessly, unsure of where to go but unable to just head home and wait. And that's when I saw it. Claire's car parked in the driveway of a boutique hotel on the edge of town. My stomach dropped. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. It didn't mean anything, I told myself. Claire could be meeting someone else. Megan wasn't here. But then I saw her. Megan stepped out of the hotel lobby, holding an umbrella. She was laughing, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months. And behind her, Claire emerged, her hand brushing Megan's lower back in a way that didn't look friendly. My heart raced as I sat frozen in my car. They didn't see me as they walked to Claire's car. Megan climbed into the passenger seat, and Claire got behind the wheel. They drove off, oblivious to my presence, while I followed at a safe distance, trying to keep my mind from spiraling. When they pulled into Claire's driveway, my suspicions solidified. Megan didn't come home that night. I stayed parked down the street for hours, hoping against hope that this wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The next morning, Megan came home around 10 a.m., wearing the same outfit she'd left in the night before. Her hair was disheveled, and she carried a smug sort of energy I didn't recognize. "Morning," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen. She didn't offer an explanation, didn't seem to care that I'd been up all night waiting for her. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "With Claire," she replied casually, grabbing a mug and filling it with coffee. "Overnight." She finally looked at me, her brow furrowing. "What's your point, Alex? You know we're close." We lost track of time, and I crashed on her couch. "It's not a big deal. Not a big deal." I bit back the anger rising in my chest. "You didn't think to call or text?" "My phone died." She held up her phone as if to prove her point, even though I could see it lighting up with notifications. "Don't lie to me, Megan." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dangerous passing through them. "I'm not lying. Why are you being so dramatic?" I wanted to scream, to tell her I saw her at the hotel. But I wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, I said, I feel like something's going on. You've been distant. You're hiding things from me. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh my God, Alex. Not everything is about you. Claire and I are going through some personal stuff. Okay? You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, my voice rising. She set the mug down with a thud and crossed her arms. Fine. If you must know, Claire is going through a rough patch, and I'm supporting her. Sorry if that doesn't fit into your little perfect husband narrative. I didn't believe her, but I let it go. For now, I needed proof, something undeniable. Later that day, I installed a GPS tracker on her car. I knew it was extreme, but I couldn't trust her anymore. If Megan was lying, I had to know the full extent of it. Over the next few days, Megan's behavior only confirmed my worst fears. She was out late more often, always claiming to be with Claire. Some nights, she wouldn't even come home, saying she needed to be there for her friend. The GPS tracker told a different story. On Tuesday night, Megan told me she was heading to Claire's to help her sort through some personal things. She kissed me on the cheek like everything was fine and walked out the door. I waited 20 minutes before opening the app on my phone. The tracker showed her car parked not at Claire's house, but at the same boutique hotel I'd seen them at before. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the blinking red on the map. My hands trembled as I considered my next move. Should I confront her? Go there now? My mind raced with scenarios, but none of them ended well. Instead, I decided to wait until morning. I'd already made up my mind to check her phone the next chance I got. I'd find the proof I needed, and when I confronted her, she wouldn't be able to twist the truth. When Megan came home the next morning, her excuse was the same. I stayed with Claire. She didn't even try to look remorseful. It was like she was daring me to push further. I let it slide again, forcing a smile as if I believed her. But that afternoon, when she went to take a shower, I seized my moment. While Megan showered, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might drown out the sound of the water running. I tried her password, our anniversary date, and it worked. My hands were shaking as I navigated to her messages. What I found made my stomach churn. There were texts between Megan and Claire. Dozens of them. Some were casual, others intimate. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I miss you already. Can't wait to hold you again. Alex has no idea. He's so clueless it's almost funny. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The casual cruelty of her words, the mockery of my trust, was like a knife twisting in my chest. I scrolled further, finding photos. Photos of them together, laughing, kissing, lying in bed. Couldn't breathe. My hands clenched the phone so tightly I thought I might crush it. Then, I noticed something else. An event in her calendar titled, Weekend Getaway, scheduled for the coming Friday. The location, that same boutique hotel. I locked the phone and set it back on the nightstand just as the shower turned off. When Megan came into the room, wrapped in a towel, she didn't notice anything was off. "What's for dinner tonight?" she asked casually, drying her hair. I forced a smile. "Not sure yet. Maybe we can order something?" She nodded, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, running through the messages in my mind. The betrayal, the lies, and the worst part, she didn't even feel guilty. But now I had what I needed. Proof. That night, as Megan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. The anger had solidified into something cold and sharp. A quiet, calculated resolve. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her pay. The texts and photos from her phone were enough evidence to shatter any excuse she might come up with. But I wanted more. I wanted to catch her in the act. The weekend getaway she had planned with Claire gave me the perfect opportunity. I'd follow them to the hotel and confront them there, in the middle of their little romantic escape. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to ensure this betrayal left a permanent scar on her life, just like it was leaving on mine. I started gathering my weapons, not literal ones, but tools for revenge. I printed out screenshots of the texts and photos from her phone, saving copies to a USB drive for safekeeping. I reached out to my lawyer, pretending it was for some unrelated legal matter, and asked about the process of filing for divorce in our state. The next step was harder. Claire had a girlfriend, a sweet, shy woman named Hannah. I didn't know her well, but we'd met a few times at parties. I debated whether to tell her. Was it cruel to drag her into this? Ultimately, I decided she deserved to know. The next morning, while Megan was at work, I called Hannah. "Hey, it's Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, hi," she said, sounding surprised. "What's up?" "I need to talk to you about something," I said. "It's about Claire." Hannah hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "Not really. Can we meet somewhere?" This isn't a conversation to have over the phone. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop that afternoon. When I arrived, Hannah was already waiting, nervously sipping a latte. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, but her expression faltered when she noticed the grim look on my face. "What's going on?" she asked. I pulled out my phone, opening the gallery where I'd saved the screenshots. "I think it's better if I show you." Her face turned pale as she scrolled through the messages and photos. By the time she reached the end, her hands were trembling. I can't believe this," she whispered. "Claire and Megan?" "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't know how else to tell you." Hannah sat there in stunned silence for a moment, then looked up at me, her eyes hardening. "What are you going to do?" I leaned back in my chair, the cold resolve returning. "I'm going to ruin them." Hannah stared at me, then nodded slowly. "Let me know how I can help." By Friday, everything was in place. I'd confirmed the boutique hotel reservation Megan had made. Under Claire's name, of course. I didn't confront her as she packed a bag that morning, claiming she was going on a girls' weekend with Claire to unwind. "Enjoy yourself," I said, masking my disgust with a forced smile. I texted Hannah after Megan left. "It's happening tonight. Are you ready?" Her response came quickly. "I'm ready. Just tell me when and where." I spent the afternoon preparing. I gathered the printed evidence, text messages, photos, everything incriminating, and placed them in 2 envelopes, one for Megan and one for Claire. I also included a letter in each, detailing how I felt, how they had betrayed me, and how this moment would change their lives forever. By the time I arrived at the hotel, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the parking lot. I parked a few spaces away from Claire's car and waited. My heart pounded as I checked my phone, watching the minutes crawl by. At 7:30 p.m., they emerged from the hotel lobby. Megan was dressed to the nines in a sleek black dress, laughing as Claire held the door open for her. They walked to the restaurant attached to the hotel, arm in arm, completely oblivious to the fact that I was watching. Once they were inside, I texted Hannah, "Room 304. Meet me in the parking lot in 20 minutes." Hannah arrived exactly on time, her face a mixture of determination and pain. She was clutching her own envelope of evidence, photos of Claire and Megan she'd printed from the screenshots I'd shared. "You sure you're ready for this?" I asked her. She nodded, her jaw clenched. "They deserve this." Together, we walked into the hotel and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. My pulse raced as we stood outside room 304. The soft murmur of voices and laughter filtered through the door. I looked at Hannah. "Let's do this." She nodded and I knocked. The laughter from inside stopped abruptly. There was a moment of silence, followed by Claire's voice. "Who is it?" I didn't answer. I just knocked again, louder this time. After a few seconds, the door opened a crack, and Claire's face appeared. Her cheerful expression vanished the moment she saw me. "Alex?" she stammered, her voice tinged with panic. Before she could close the door, I pushed it open and stepped inside, with Hannah right behind me. The room smelled of expensive perfume and cheap wine. On the bed lay an open bottle of champagne, 2 glasses, and a scattered trail of clothes. Megan appeared from the bathroom, her face lighting up with shock when she saw us. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, trying to cover her panic with anger. "I could ask you the same thing," I said coldly, holding up the envelope in my hand. "But I already know." Hannah stepped forward, her envelope clenched tightly in her fist. "I can't believe you, Claire. After everything we've been through, this is what you do." Claire's face drained of color. "Hannah, it's not what it looks like." "Oh, shut up," Hannah spat, throwing the envelope onto the bed. Photos spilled out, each one more damning than the last. Megan and Claire together, laughing, kissing, tangled in bed. Megan's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. "You went through my phone?" she shouted, her voice shrill. "Don't you dare try to make this about me." I shot back, stepping closer. "You lied to me. You cheated. You thought you could get away with it because it wasn't a man. Did you think that wouldn't hurt me?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, my voice rising. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could humiliate me and I just sit at home, clueless?" Claire tried to interject, her voice shaky. "Alex, calm down. Don't you dare tell me to calm down," I snapped, pointing a finger at her. "You're just as guilty as she is. You knew what you were doing, and you didn't care about the damage you'd cause." The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Megan and Claire stood frozen, their betrayal laid bare. Hannah broke the silence, her voice cold and trembling. "You both disgust me. Don't come crawling back when this all falls apart. You made your bed. Now lie in it." With that, she turned and stormed out, leaving Claire and Megan gaping after her. I took a deep breath, my anger simmering just below the surface. "I'll be filing for divorce on Monday," I said, my voice steady but deadly. "And trust me, Megan, you won't be walking away from this unscathed." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and one more thing, don't ever come home. Your things will be waiting for you in the garage." I walked out without looking back, leaving them to face the wreckage of their betrayal. The drive home was quiet, but my mind was anything but. Every word, every excuse Megan and Claire had tried to give me replayed in my head like a broken record. The betrayal wasn't just a knife in the back. It was a stake driven straight through my chest. When I got home, I grabbed 2 suitcases from the attic and began packing Megan's belongings. Clothes, shoes, toiletries. Every trace of her was stuffed away and dragged into the garage. I couldn't bear to have her things in the house anymore. Midway through, my phone buzzed. It was Megan. I stared at the screen, watching her name flash repeatedly, but I didn't answer. A text came through moments later. "Alex, please, can we talk? This isn't what you think." I laughed bitterly. Not what I think. Did she really believe she could talk her way out of this? Then another message. "I made a mistake. I love you. Please give me a chance to explain." I blocked her number. By morning, word had already spread. Hannah called me, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. "Claire tried to come home last night," she said. "I told her she could pack her things and leave. I'm done." "Good," I replied. "They don't deserve anything less." My next call was to my lawyer. I laid out everything, the texts, the photos, the betrayal. She listened intently, then gave me a clear plan to file for divorce and ensure Megan couldn't spin the narrative in her favor. "This will be messy," she warned me. "Messy is fine," I said. "I want her to feel everything she's put me through." By the weekend, I decided it wasn't enough for Megan and Claire to face the consequences in private. They'd flaunted their affair so openly, thinking they were untouchable. Now, the world would see them for who they really were. I compiled all the evidence, the photos, texts, screenshots, and uploaded them to a shared folder. I sent the link to Megan's family, Claire's colleagues, and a few mutual friends who'd always been quick to side with them during arguments. Within hours, the fallout began. Megan's sister called me, furious. "How could you do this to her?" she demanded. "How could she do this to me?" I shot back. "If you're mad, be mad at her. She destroyed this marriage, not me." Claire's job wasn't spared either. Hannah had forwarded the evidence to her employer, pointing out how Claire had used company resources to fund her weekend getaways with Megan. By Monday morning, Claire was fired. Megan showed up at the house 2 days later, ignoring my clear instructions to stay away. I heard her banging on the front door and yelling my name, her voice frantic. "Alex, please, let me explain," she cried. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see her standing there, disheveled and tear-streaked. It didn't stir any sympathy in me, only cold satisfaction. After a few minutes, she slumped against the door, defeated. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said softly, as if I were listening. "I love you, Alex. I made a mistake. Please, don't do this." Her voice cracked, but I didn't budge. I'd waited for this moment, the moment where she realized her actions had real, irreversible consequences. When she finally left, I noticed a handwritten note slipped under the door. I picked it up more out of curiosity than anything else. The note was desperate and manipulative, full of promises to change and veiled accusations. I only turned to Claire because I felt lonely. It read, "You've been distant, and I didn't know how to reach you anymore." It made my blood boil. She was trying to pin this on me, to shift the blame for her betrayal onto my shoulders. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. The fallout hit Claire just as hard, if not harder. Hannah moved out of their shared apartment and cut off all contact, taking Claire's betrayal personally and publicly. Mutual friends sided with Hannah, leaving Claire increasingly isolated. Then came the cherry on top. Her ex-boss filed a formal complaint against her for violating company policies by using work resources to conduct her affair. By the end of the week, Claire's professional reputation was in shambles. Hannah called me one evening to update me on Claire's misery. "She texted me today," Hannah said. "She's begging for another chance, saying she made a mistake." "What did you say?" I asked. "I told her she's dead to me," Hannah replied coldly, "and that I'm better off without her." We both shared a moment of grim satisfaction. It wasn't often you got to see someone who wronged you get exactly what they deserved. Megan, meanwhile, was scrambling to save face. She tried to reach out to our mutual friends, spinning a sob story about how she'd been lost and confused. Some of them bought it, others didn't. One friend, Julia, called to tell me about the things Megan had been saying. "She's telling people you've been cold and distant for months," Julia said. "That's why she turned to Claire. She's trying to make it sound like she had no choice." "Unbelievable," I muttered. "She's still playing the victim." "I didn't believe her," Julia assured me. "I've seen how much you loved her. She's just trying to cover her own ass." Hearing that brought a small measure of comfort. At least some people saw through her lies. By the second week after the confrontation, Megan's life was in complete disarray. Her attempts to salvage her reputation had failed spectacularly. Word had spread far and wide, thanks to the evidence I had shared, and Megan found herself ostracized by friends and even some family members. Her sister, who had initially defended her, stopped responding to her calls after seeing the full extent of her lies and betrayal. Her parents, mortified, called me to apologize on her behalf. "We had no idea, Alex," her mother said, her voice heavy with shame. "If we had known." "It's not your fault," I said curtly, not interested in their guilt. Megan, however, wasn't done trying to claw her way back into my life. She showed up at my workplace, tears streaming down her face, causing a scene in front of my colleagues. "Alex, please," she begged, as security escorted her out. "I love you. I'll do anything to make this right." The sight of her, desperate and humiliated, would have broken me once. But now it only fueled my resolve. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. I had security call the police and filed a restraining order against her that same afternoon. With the divorce papers filed and the restraining order in place, I felt the weight of Megan's betrayal finally begin to lift. The house was mine. The memories of our marriage swept out with the trash bags full of her belongings. Hannah and I kept in touch, finding solace in each other's company. While we weren't romantically involved, our shared pain created a bond that was hard to explain. We'd meet for coffee occasionally, updating each other on how life was moving forward. Claire had left town after losing her job, and Megan, well, no one seemed to know where she'd gone. Last I heard, she was living in a cheap apartment on the other side of town, working a dead-end job. It wasn't the revenge I had originally imagined. No dramatic explosion of her life, no grand act of retribution. But seeing her reduced to this, knowing she had only herself to blame, was enough. As for me, I found peace in rebuilding my life. The betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed me. I'd been burned, but I survived. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all. Living a life where she no longer had any power over me.